Julie Pace, you covered the White House for a living. This is a no-no, and yet, this town is in a huff. How could we possibly step outside the protocol rules? How could he possibly do this? He won the election. He has every right to do this.
He absolutely has every right to do this. I think the question, though, is he doing this because he's signaling a policy change? That's the question that's being asked in Washington and around the world.
And that they haven't answered.
They have not answered. And it's a very serious question. Whether Trump believes this is a big deal or not is actually not the issue here. The issue is how China is going to view this and how China will retaliate if this is a policy change. And I think that's one of the things that Trump has to come to understand as president. It's not just that your words matter, and it's not just that you may want to shake things up. It's how the world reacts. And that is actually sometimes out of his control.
As we learn about him, we're also learning about the reaction to him. And we saw this at the beginning of the George W. Bush administration. People didn't like him. Every time George W. Bush did something, they said, well, he's the village idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. When Obama became president, a lot of people said, community organizer, never been a CEO. He's in over his head. So now critics are saying Donald Trump didn't know. Some of the critics are saying he obviously must not have known how sensitive this issue is. His campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, says absolutely untrue.
This is the president-elect. This will be his administration. He'll be commander-in-chief, and he'll be president of the United States imminently now. And he either will disclose or not disclose the full contents of that conversation, but he's well aware of what U.S. policy has been.
She says he's aware. The question is...
I'm kind of skeptical about that, John.
You're skeptical?
That Donald Trump is deeply intimate with the China-Taiwanese relationship? Yeah, I'm very skeptical about that. I mean, if you look at some of the phone call readouts that he's had with foreign leaders, it doesn't show a lot of depth there about his knowledge of foreign policy. I think he is trying to do what Donald Trump does, which is extend a hand of friendship to whoever reaches out to him. That's what he does, whether it's business, politics, reality TV, now the presidency. This is his MO, trying to be friendly, telling the president of Pakistan, you're doing a fantastic job. Does he actually know that or not? Probably not. That's what he does, though.
And I have to say that the tweets after the call were probably a little bit more telling to me than the fact that the call occurred, because it signaled that even if he were doing a sort of deliberate policy change, he's lashing out at his critics in a way that suggests that he just wants to be able to do what he wants. And so it's the combination of the call, the tweets afterwards that basically are like, why are you telling me what to do? And on the global stage, that is just very, I mean, to say that it's unusual is an understatement.
At the same
I think it's unsettling to people around the world.
That's a very important word.
At the same time, though, John Bolton was inside Trump Tower for a couple hours on Friday. He's long known to favor a shift away from Beijing here. So I agree with you. I'm skeptical that the president knows exactly this relationship, but that doesn't mean people who are advising him don't hear. So, I mean, I think that that's what we have to watch very carefully. Who Donald Trump is surrounding himself by, and he does want to be liked, no question about it, and he wants to extend that hand.
And there's a question about a question about what he wants to do, even if he doesn't know the intimate details. You know, if he understands that if you do this, sir, you're going to ruffle some feathers, that's one thing, and that's his right. He won the election. Plus, there are a lot of people in this town who say, forget this establishment hesitancy to anger Beijing. This is a brave little democracy. We should be more supportive publicly of Taiwan. We should poke the Chinese more and say, leave these people alone. The question is, how do you do it? You don't give the current commander-in-chief a heads up. There are men and women serving the United States military in that region who could get buzzed because of this. You don't give the Japanese, the South Koreans, or the Australians a head up. I think that is, to me, as big as an issue as whether Donald Trump, who won the election, has every right to set U.S. foreign policy, decides to take this call.
This is the difference between being a candidate in a general election where you are basically running on your own, especially Donald Trump, who didn't really have to worry about the party apparatus, didn't have a lot of people on Capitol Hill who he had to worry about appeasing. When you are president of the United States, every decision that you make affects not just yourself, your White House, and Americans. It affects your allies. It affects your adversaries. And you just don't always have control over the response. You have to think through these issues. Even a simple phone call can blow up into a huge deal incredibly quickly.
But he's now learning that lesson, and thankfully it's happening at least before he's sworn in, and hopefully that will take root, the fact that your actions have profound consequences, even as president-elect.
And it's the transition. They're trying to staff up, so it's on the one hand, you got to give them some grace because it's a busy period of time. On the other hand, the fact that they haven't explained. this is another thing we learned about, just like the conversation with the Indian developers. Trump has property interests there, so people say, aha, conflict, because you learn about it by reading the overseas press. We learned about this because of the Financial Times, and it was first reported in the Taiwanese press. That's part of the issue as well, is when do you tell the American people, and when do you tell, as I said, the current White House, we have one president at a time, how this works. But it is another example how Trump is going to be different.